quiet evening in a rainy town. Tonight's story takes place in a quiet little town where the streets soften under the evening rain and the world moves at a gentler, slower rhythm. It is the kind of night made for resting, a night made for letting the mind settle, a night where even the sound of rainfall seems to breathe with you. The rain had begun in the late afternoon, arriving not with thunder or dramatic winds, but with a calm persistence. It spread across the rooftops in delicate, even lines, sliding down shingles and gathering along edges before dripping softly to the ground. Every stone, every leaf, every window pane became part of the gentle, endless motion of water. By early evening, the town had settled into a quiet, hushed state. Lights in windows glowed a warm, honeyed yellow. Porches shone under strings of tiny bulbs, their reflections shimmering on the wet pavement. Curtains swayed faintly in the wind that slipped through narrow alleyways. There was a bakery on the corner, its ovens long cooled for the night. The glass display case inside still held a faint glow from a lone overhead bulb left on out of habit. The scent of warm bread from earlier lingered in the air outside, mixing with the smell of rain and wet earth. Next to the bakery stood a tiny bookstore, with shelves that leaned slightly to one side from age. The shop's wooden sign creaked softly whenever the wind nudged it, as though the sign itself was beginning to feel sleepy. Further along the street was the candle shop's small, amber lit, always carrying scents that felt like memories, and a cafe, one of those quiet ones where the barista knows everyone by name, even if they haven't visited in weeks. The town was small enough to walk through in 15 minutes, but on nights like this, it felt endless in the softest way, as though each street had more calm to offer if you only slowed your pace. Near the end of Willow Street stood a modest house with a sloping roof and ivy creeping steadily up its walls. A single light glowed inside, spilling warmth onto the rain-speckled glass. This was the home of the person at the center of tonight's story. Inside, the living room felt like a pocket of warmth carved gently out of the cool evening. A soft lamp cast a golden glow across the room, illuminating the fabric of a well-worn armchair. A wool blanket lay draped over its back, its threads slightly twisted from many past evenings spent exactly like this one. On a low wooden table sat a ceramic mug, a folded napkin, a half-finished biscuit, and a book with a bookmark resting halfway through the pages. The faint scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air, mingling with the subtle aroma of wood polish and old paper. The person who lived here moved with slow, gentle steps through the space. They were not hurrying toward anything. They were simply moving through the rituals of a quiet, rainy evening. In the kitchen, the kettle rested on the stove, humming faintly as it warmed. Steam began to collect around the edges of the lid, slipping out in thin curls that mixed with the soft light of the room. They reached out and turned off the heat, then listened as the quiet hiss faded. The sound blended perfectly with the rain tapping against the windows. Everything in the house seemed to sync with the rain, as if the walls themselves were breathing in time with the weather. They took a clean cup from the cupboard, selected a chamomile tea bag from a small tin, and placed it gently into the mug. The kettle felt warm in their hand as they poured the water in slow, careful motions. The tea bag darkened, releasing its soft golden color into the water, like a delicate watercolor painting spreading across paper. A warm, soothing aroma rose from the cup, carrying hints of honey and wildflowers. It filled the kitchen with a quiet, comforting presence. They carried the mug back into the living room, stepping around the creaky floorboard near the table, a sound they had long since memorized. The living room welcomed them the way an old friend does, without effort, without expectation, simply with presence. They set the mug down and moved toward the window. Outside, the rain blurred the view of the street, just enough to make it look dreamlike. The lamplight stretched across the road in a long shimmer, broken only by the occasional ripple of passing drops. The houses across the way glowed with soft interior light. Behind some windows, silhouettes moved gently, someone closing drapes, someone carrying a cup to the sink, someone settling into their own evening calm. The town felt as if it were wrapped in wool, in warmth, in a soft hush, a hush that invited anyone awake to listen, slow down, breathe. Inside this quiet house, the person turned away from the window and returned to the armchair. They pulled the wool blanket over their legs, feeling the familiar weight of it settle against their skin. The chair's cushions seemed to mold around them, remembering the shape of their body, offering support in all the places that mattered. They picked up the mug, wrapped both hands around it, and felt the warmth seep into their palms. It was a grounding warmth, steady, gentle, reassuring. They took a small sip. The tea tasted mild and soothing, its warmth traveling down through their chest, spreading into a soft, quiet warmth that encouraged every part of them to let go. Their shoulders loosened, their breath deepened, their thoughts slowed. Outside, the rain continued its steady dance, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, always calm. They listened to it the way one might listen to a lullaby, not with full attention but with full presence. The sound wrapped around them, accompanied by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. Everything sounded soft tonight. Even the house itself seemed to exhale with them. They let their gaze drift to the book on the table but didn't reach for it. There was no need for words on a page when the evening itself was already telling a story. Instead, they simply breathed and listened and let their body rest. Time passed slowly, gently. The tea cooled, the rain shifted, the world softened. Eventually, they set the mug down and stood from the chair, drawn toward the window by something they couldn't quite explain. A quiet curiosity, a desire to see how the rain was falling now. Outside, the reflections had changed again. The golden shimmer had lengthened, stretching wide across the road like a ribbon of light. Something about the way it moved made them want to step outside for a moment. Not to go anywhere, not to do anything, just to be part of the night. They slipped on their coat, wrapped a scarf around their neck, and stepped into comfortable shoes waiting near the door. They opened the door and stepped outside. The air greeted them with a cool, gentle touch. The rain felt softer now, more like a whisper than a patter. It rested lightly on their cheeks and hair, blending with the faint breeze. They closed the door carefully behind them, feeling the familiar weight of it settling into place. The street was quiet, not empty quiet, a peaceful kind of quiet that made every small detail feel clearer, more intentional. The sound of water flowing along the edges of the pavement, the distant rumble of a car turning onto another street, the soft rustle of leaves as droplets slipped from branch to branch, their footsteps forming small splashes with each step. They walked with no destination, letting the night guide them. Left foot, right foot, soft splash, soft tap, breath in, breath out. Everything was steady, everything was gentle, everything was okay. The lampposts above them cast halos of warm light that shimmered in the mist. The reflections on the road formed delicate patterns, shifting with every raindrop. They noticed the bakery first, still faintly fragrant even after closing. Then the bookstore with its slightly fogged windows. Then the cafe, its sign rocking softly with the wind. A cat darted across the street, paused near a puddle, then slipped into the shadows of a porch. The world felt alive, but calm, like a slow heartbeat. As they continued walking, the park came into view. Tall trees formed a canopy overhead, their branches heavy with droplets. The path beneath them glistened like wet glass. Every lamp along the path created a warm, circular pool of light. They stepped beneath the trees and felt the rain change. It no longer fell directly from the sky. Instead, it filtered through the leaves in tiny scattered drops, soft taps, gentle ticks, quiet rhythms. It sounded like a collection of whispers, all speaking the same language of calm. They walked deeper into the park, past the wooden bench slick with rain, past the hedge glistening under the lamps, past the tall maple whose branches swayed in the breeze. Each step carried them further into stillness, further from the noise of the day, further from the weight of any lingering thoughts. You are safe. You are allowed to slow down. They paused for a moment, listening intently to the layered sounds around them. The rain, the breeze, the faint hum of a distant street lamp, the soft shifting of leaves. Everything blended into one calm sound, a sound that felt like the night itself breathing. They continued walking until the park path curved back toward Maple Lane, where the candle shop glowed softly in its little corner of the street. The window shimmered with light, amber and warm. It drew them closer. They stepped toward the door, and gently, quietly, they pushed it open. The bell above the door chimed softly. The scent inside drifted toward them. Vanilla, cedarwood, warm honey, and the faint sweetness of flowers. And just like that, the night deepened into calm even further. The warm air of the candle shop wrapped around them the moment they stepped inside, like a soft blanket pulled gently over their shoulders. It felt almost like stepping out of time, not forward, not backward, just sideways into a quieter, dimly glowing place. The light within the shop was golden and low, flickering gently from the candles that were arranged on trays and shelves. It was not bright enough to reveal everything at once, but just enough to guide the eyes slowly from one warm glow to another. The shop seemed to breathe. The shadows moved softly along the walls, stretching and shrinking in a lazy rhythm that perfectly matched the rainfall outside. The bell above the door settled into silence as they took their first step deeper inside. The wooden floor gave a faint creak, not loud enough to disturb the quiet, but present enough to remind them that this shop had been here for many years. The scent of wax and honey and subtle herbs floated through the air, carried lightly on every breath. Their eyes drifted along the shelves nearest to them. Thick wax candles in jars of amber glass, slender tapers in soft cream tones, clay bowls filled with scented wax, each one decorated with dried petals and herbs. Everything looked handcrafted, as though someone had poured not just wax but time and care into each piece. They reached out and brushed their fingers along the edge of a wooden shelf. It felt smooth, worn slightly by the hands of people who had stood exactly where they were standing now. People who had come in from the rain, seeking warmth and a moment of quiet. A row of candles stood neatly in small jars with handwritten labels attached by twine. One read, "Warm Hearth," another, "Quiet Morning," another, "Rain-Filled Air." Each label felt like an invitation to a feeling, a memory, a softer moment. They lifted one jar from the shelf and unscrewed the lid slowly, savoring the tiny rasp of the metal threading. Inside, the scent rose gently soft, comforting, just a hint of lavender blending with something sweet, maybe almond or vanilla. It was the smell of fresh bedding and warm light, of a house that has been lived in lovingly for many years. They closed the lid softly and moved to another jar. This one was labeled old library. When they opened it, the scent brought notes of worn paper, polished wood, and the faintest breath of pine. It reminded them of cozy corners and pages turned slowly on rainy afternoons. They wandered deeper into the shop, letting their steps be guided by curiosity rather than direction. Shelves curved along the walls in gentle arcs. Small tables held trays of tiny candles arranged by color. The far corner of the room glowed more brightly than the rest, illuminated by a lamp with a honey-colored shade. On a long table beneath that lamp stood an assortment of candles that were larger and more elaborate than the others. Some had dried flowers pressed into the sides. Some had swirls of color embedded in the wax. One had delicate patterns carved around the edges, as if someone had spent hours shaping it by hand. They reached out and picked up a candle that was shaped like a small lantern. It was heavier than it looked, with smooth sides and a gentle weight that felt grounding in the palm of their hand. The scent inside was labeled Fireside Evening. When they opened the lid, the warm, smoky aroma drifted upward, carrying hints of cedar and something like toasted sugar. It reminded them of winter holidays, of blankets pulled close around shoulders, of nights spent watching the slow flicker of a fireplace. They held the candle close for a moment, letting the warmth of the scent settle into their senses. Then, with the same care they had taken when picking it up, they placed it back exactly where it had been. At the far end of the shop, near the window, was a small counter with wooden drawers built into the base. Behind the counter sat an old tall jar filled with wax scraps pieces, left over from candles that had been trimmed or smoothed. The scraps were in different shades of cream, amber, and pale gold. They looked like tiny soft stones collected from a quiet shore. A framed photograph stood beside the jar. It showed a much younger version of someone, perhaps the shop's owner, standing behind the same counter with dozens of fresh candles lined up in front of them. The smile in the photo seemed warm and steady, as if nothing in the world pleased that person more than this little place of glowing light. There was no one in the shop right now, but it didn't feel empty. It felt as though the space itself held a quiet presence, as though the scent, the light, the warmth were all alive in their own way, keeping the shop company in the absence of its keeper. They wandered toward a table filled with tiny candles arranged in perfect rows. These ones were labeled with names that felt like stories. Soft steps on an old staircase, window pane rain, warm hands, night lantern, honey in the air. Each candle seemed to be a memory sealed in wax. They picked up one called Evening Echo. When they opened the lid, a whisper of scent drifted up. It was subtle, almost shy, a mix of cool rain, worn wood, and something sweet. It reminded them of the moment just after someone leaves a room, a trace of their presence still lingering in the air. They took a deeper breath. The scent wrapped around them like a thin blanket. It felt familiar somehow, though they couldn't quite place why. A warmth spread through their chest, small but noticeable, like the slow rising of the sun on a winter morning. They closed the candle and placed it gently back in its row. A soft creaking sound came from the back of the shop, just the old wood settling under the night air. They listened to it for a moment, letting the quiet fill their mind. You are safe here. You are allowed to breathe slowly. There is no hurry tonight. They took another step and felt the wooden floor shift a little beneath them. The boards moved, not in a startling way, but in a way that added to the feeling of age and comfort within the shop, like a gentle sigh. On another shelf nearby were candles shaped like small houses, tiny cottages with roofs painted in soft pastel shades. Each one had a wick emerging from its chimney. Beside the display was a little handwritten sign that read, "Home, in all the small ways. They smiled when they read that. The words felt true, not just for the candles, but for the night itself. Home wasn't always a structure. Sometimes it was a moment, a feeling, a softness found in the curve of a lamp's glow or the scent of a cup of tea. Sometimes home was silence shared with the rain. They picked up one of the cottage candles, admiring the tiny painted windows. The candle smelled of cinnamon and warm bread, as if someone had been baking inside the miniature home. They set it back down and let their gaze drift across the shelves again. The shop was small, but it felt immense in its calmness, the kind of space where time stretched gently outward, offering room to breathe. They walked toward another shelf lined with candles in pale ceramic cups. The cups were glazed in soft shades cream, moss green, muted blue. Each candle was topped with tiny dried flowers, preserved perfectly in the wax. They picked up a candle labeled Quiet Meadow. The scent inside reminded them of long grass swaying in a gentle breeze, of sunlight warming the earth, of distant hills on a spring day. They imagined lying in that meadow, the blades of grass ticking softly against their arms, the sky open above them. The next candle, labeled Autumn Porch, smelled faintly of apples and wood smoke, of knit scarves and chilly mornings, of leaves crunching softly underfoot. Another candle, Moonlit Steps, carried the scent of cool stone and evening air, like a midnight walk along a path lit only by moonlight. Each scent told a story, and each story felt soft enough to hold. They wandered through the shop for a long while, letting time slip past without noticing. The bell above the door chimed whenever the wind pushed at it from outside, though no new customers entered. Rain continued to fall beyond the window, leaving slow trails of droplets running down the glass. At one point they came across a shelf of unlit lanterns. Inside each lantern sat a candle with a scent meant to match the lantern's color. A pale gold lantern held a candle named Honey Light. A deep green lantern held one called Forest After Rain. A lantern made of soft, cloudy glass held a candle called Morning Fog. They picked up the Forest After Rain lantern, opened the door on its side, and lifted the candle inside. The scent drifted out, carrying hints of pine, moss, and fresh rain, the kind that falls deep in the woods where the air stays cool no matter the season. They closed the lantern carefully and placed it back on the shelf, listening to the tiny sound of metal meeting metal. A sense of stillness settled even deeper into them. The shop felt like a world within a world, a small sanctuary tucked away from everything else. You are safe. You are not required to think quickly tonight. Your breaths can be as slow as the rain. They approached the counter again and paused. The little jar of leftover wax scraps caught their attention once more. The pieces inside looked like fragments of old stories, bits of candles that had once burned brightly, each scrap a memory of a glow that warmed a room. Beside the jar was a small wooden box filled with matchbooks. The covers of the matchbooks were printed with illustrations of tiny stars, swirling leaves, or gentle waves. Some were blank, waiting to be touched by hands that needed them. They picked up one of the matchbooks and opened it. The matches were lined neatly inside, their heads pale and unused. There was something reassuring about the orderliness of it, something steady and calm. They closed the matchbook and set it gently back in the box. A deep breath rose naturally in their chest, unhurried and full. The exhale came just as slowly, as though the shop itself was guiding their rhythm. After wandering through every corner of the candle shop, touching scents and memories and small glimmers of warmth, they finally stepped back toward the door. They paused, taking in the soft amber glow one last time. It felt like saying goodbye to a quiet friend. They opened the door, and the bell chimed softly above them. The cool, misty night air greeted their skin. The scent of rain and damp earth mixed with the lingering fragrances from the shop, creating a blend that felt like the night itself was giving them a gentle embrace. They stepped outside and closed the door behind them. The street felt even calmer now, though the rain had not changed. Perhaps it was not the street that softened. Perhaps it was them. They took a slow step, then another, letting the night settle around them. The puddles reflected the warm glow from the candle shop window. The lamplight stretched across the street like a golden thread. The trees swayed softly overhead, shedding droplets that sparkled as they fell. The world was quiet. The world was soft. The world was ready to lull them deeper into rest. They began their slow walk home through the peaceful town, carrying the gentle warmth of the candle shop within them. Every step felt lighter. Every breath felt deeper. Tonight, nothing needed to be hurried. Nothing needed to be solved. Nothing needed to be held tightly. The rain whispered its steady lullaby around them, and the night welcomed them onward. Tonight's story continues as they walk slowly through the rainy town, carrying the warmth of the candle shop with them, like a small flame burning quietly inside their chest. They moved at an easy, unhurried pace, letting their steps fall where they wanted to, without planning, without measuring distance. The streets they knew so well felt slightly different under the night rain, softer at the edges, blurred at the corners, as though the town was wrapped in a gentle fog made of sound and light. The glow from the candle shop window faded behind them, replaced by the softer, quieter lights of homes. Curtains glowed faintly from within. A porch light here, a hallway lamp there, small, steady reminders that there were others nearby, resting in their own ways, in their own quiet spaces. A car rolled slowly down the next street, its tires whispering through the shallow puddles. Headlights washed gently over the buildings and faded again, leaving behind only the rain and the echo of its passage. They continued along the sidewalk, noticing how the rain collected in tiny pools along the curb. The water reflected the lampposts, turning each beam of light into long dancing streaks that bent and wavered as drops disturbed the surface. They passed by the tiny bookstore on the corner. Its sign still swayed gently on its hook, creaking now and then as the wind brushed against it. The interior lights had been turned off, but the faint outlines of shelves and stacked books were still visible in the dimness. Even in the dark, the store seemed full of stories, as though words continued to drift through the air, unbothered by closing hours. They slowed their steps a little more, letting themselves look at each window they passed. Some windows were fully covered by curtains, keeping all their warmth inside. Others were half open, revealing small slices of interior worlds, a table, a lamp, a plant on a windowsill, a painting on a wall. Life in quiet fragments. The street ahead narrowed slightly. Ivy-covered brick walls grew closer together on either side. The lamps here were older, their light softer and slightly dimmer, creating cozy circles of brightness separated by stretches of gentle shadow. They stepped through those alternating zones of light and darkness with a sense of trust. There was nothing lurking in the shadows tonight. The darkness was soft, not sharp, cool, not cold. It held the rain like a secret and released it in a soothing hiss across the pavement. You are safe. You are not alone in this world, even when it is quiet. The night can hold you. Their breath remained slow and deep. Inhale, exhale. Their lungs filled easily. Their chest rose without effort. Their shoulders stayed soft and low, no longer pulled upward by the invisible weight of the day. Somewhere distant, a train horn called out once, long and low. It sounded far away, softened by the rain in the distance. It passed through them like a slow wave, and then faded, leaving behind only the small sounds of the town again. They reached an intersection where Willow Street branched off to the right. The turn felt natural, like following a familiar path in a dream. They didn't have to think about it. Their feet moved before their thoughts did, guided by the quiet promise of home waiting at the end of that road. Willow Street looked especially peaceful in the rain. Small trees lined the sidewalks, their leaves dripping in a steady rhythm. The branches arched gently over the street in places, forming a kind of soft tunnel. They walked beneath one of these arches and paused for a moment, listening to the unique sound the rain made here. More muffled, more layered, a blend of leaf and bark and air. Tiny droplets fell from the leaves above, landing lightly on their shoulders, on their coat, on the sidewalk around them. They tilted their head back slightly, letting a few raindrops touch their face. Eyes closing for a brief moment, they allowed themselves to feel the cool dampness on their skin, the way it contrasted with the warmth still gathered inside them from the candle shop and the tea. Then gently, they opened their eyes and continued walking. The houses along Willow Street were modest and cozy, each with its own quiet personality. One house had a porch swing moving softly in the breeze. Another had small lanterns lining the steps, casting warm spots of light on the wet wood. Another had a wreath on the door, even though it wasn't a holiday, just a year-round decoration of dried flowers and ribbon. As they approached their own house, they felt a familiar sense of comfort rising within them. The ivy on the wall, the slight lean of the roof, the way the single-lit window glowed against the darker ones. It all looked exactly as it should. They climbed the short steps to the front door, reached for the handle, and turned it slowly. The door opened with its usual soft sigh, as if it were exhaling in welcome. Stepping inside, they were greeted by the gentle warmth of the house. It wasn't hot, just pleasantly warm, like the air had been quietly holding onto the day's leftover heat. It felt like being wrapped in a physical memory of all the earlier evenings they had spent here, in this same room, in this same soft light. They closed the door behind them, the faint click of the latch settling into place like a punctuation mark, marking the end of their walk and the beginning of another soft chapter of the night. The living room looked almost exactly as they had left it. The lamp still glowed on the side table. The blanket was folded neatly over the chair. The mug, now empty and cool, sat where they had placed it earlier. Only a few small new droplets on their coat and scarf hinted that they had been out in the rain at all. They moved slowly into the room, shrugging off the coat and hanging it on its usual hook by the doorway. The scarf followed, draped over the top of the coat so it could dry. Their shoes came off next, placed side by side near the door, toes pointing toward the wall. The house felt especially still now, not silent in a hollow way, but settled, calm, as though the walls and floors and furniture were all resting in their own way. In the kitchen, they filled the kettle once more, not out of thirst alone, but out of appreciation for the ritual. The simple act of boiling water, steeping tea, wrapping hands around a mug had become a kind of anchor for their evenings, a way of telling their mind and body, it's time to slow down now. It's time to let go. They set the kettle on the stove and lit the flame. The soft rising hum began again, a sound that blended seamlessly with the rain outside. They chose, once more, the chamomile tea familiar, gentle, undemanding. While they waited for the water to heat, They leaned against the kitchen counter, palms resting on the smooth surface, and listened. The rain, the kettle, the faint ticking of the clock in the next room, the quiet hum of electricity in the walls, the symphony of a house at night. Their mind did not rush to fill the quiet. It simply floated in it. When the water reached that perfect, soft bubbling sound, they turned off the flame and poured the hot liquid into the waiting mug. The tea bag darkened and bloomed, releasing its color and scent like a slow exhale. Steam rose, curling upward in lazy spirals, disappearing into the air above the stove. They carried the mug carefully back into the living room and placed it on the side table near the armchair. Before sitting, they walked to the window again. From inside, the rain looked softer, as though the glass had turned it into a muted painting. The street lamps glowed in blurred halos. The pavement gleamed. The reflection of their own lamp behind them floated faintly in the glass. Their reflection was gentle now, their features softened by the warm light, the slight flush of their cheeks from the cool outside air, the relaxed set of their shoulders, the calm in their eyes. They didn't analyze what they saw. They didn't judge it. They simply acknowledged themselves, present in this quiet night, safe in this small, familiar room. A droplet slid slowly down the outside of the window, tracing a wandering path downward. They followed its movement for a moment with their eyes, watching how it merged with other droplets, how it hesitated and then moved on. Then they turned away and returned to the armchair. They sat down slowly, letting their bodies sink into the cushion, letting the chair hold their weight. They pulled the blanket over their legs and tucked it gently around their feet. The fabric warmed quickly against their skin. They lifted the mug and took a small sip of the tea. The warmth traveled down into their chest, spreading outward through their ribs, across their back, up toward their shoulders. It felt like the inside of their body was being wrapped in the same soft comfort as the outside. Their breathing fell into a steady rhythm again. In, out, in, out. The world outside the window continued to move at its own calm pace. Rain falling, water flowing, clouds shifting, light bending, time stretching. Inside, everything slowed to match the pace of their own breath. They glanced at the book on the table. The bookmark sat nestled between its pages, waiting patiently. But there was no urgency. The story inside the book could wait. Another evening, another moment. Tonight, the story already unfolding in the room, the rain, the tea, the flickering shadows. The steady chair was enough. They placed the mug back on the table, not empty yet, but not full either. It would be there if they wanted more. They did not need to decide right away. Their hands relaxed in their lap, fingers loosely curled. Their shoulders sank a bit deeper into the back of the chair. Their head tilted gently toward the side, nearer to the soft glow of the lamp. The blanket felt heavier now, in a comforting way. Their eyes drifted slowly over the room once more, taking in every detail in a way that was both present and unfocused. The shelf in the corner with a few framed photos and small objects gathered over time, the worn rug beneath their feet with its faded pattern, the way the light cast soft curved shadows along the floorboards. It all felt familiar, like a lullaby that had been humming in the background of their life for years. Their thoughts, once full of the day's tasks, had thinned out into something much lighter. Instead of a crowd of ideas jostling for attention, there were only a few soft impressions drifting through their awareness. The candle shop's warm light, the sound of the bell above the door, the label that read, "Safe and Sound," the way the trees in the park had lifted their branches to the rain, the soft echo of their own footsteps on the wet pavement. Each memory floated by like a leaf carried on slow-moving water, They could watch them if they wanted to, or they could simply let them pass. You don't have to hold on to any thought right now. You can let them all drift by. Your mind is allowed to rest. Their eyelids felt heavier now, not because they were forcing them to close, but because the body had decided it was ready. The muscles in their face relaxed. The small, constant work of expression eased. They let their eyes close part way, then fully, with no resistance. Behind their closed lids, the light from the lamp became a warm, gentle glow, not bright, not defined, just a soft wash of color at the edge of awareness. The sound of the rain remained, a quiet, steady whisper at the edges of the night. It mingled with the silence of the house, with the slow inhale and exhale of their own breathing. In the chair, wrapped in the blanket, supported by the cushion, held by the stillness of the room, they surrendered a little more with each passing moment. Their hands grew heavier in their lap. Their legs relaxed deeper into the fabric beneath the blanket. Their shoulders no longer felt as if they had anything to hold up. The mug on the table, the book, the lamp, the rug, the window, all of it waited without expectation. The town outside continued to rest, houses settling, lights dimming, paths drying in patches where the rain had softened, clouds drifting past the tops of the trees, unseen but gently present. Inside this small home, the person at the center of our story hovered peacefully at the edge of sleep. Thoughts came now in images, not words. A candle flame dancing slowly in a dark room, a window with rain trailing down its glass, a quiet pathway beneath tall trees, a small amber-lit shop full of scents and warmth and gentle labels. None of these images demanded attention. They were simply there, soft and distant, like stars behind a thin curtain of clouds. You have done enough for today. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to rest deeply and fully. The night will take care of the rest. Breath in, breath out. The light in the room seemed to grow warmer as their awareness grew softer, even though nothing in the room had truly changed. Only their relationship to it had shifted, from awake and observing to drifting and trusting. They were no longer holding on to the day. The day was releasing its hold on them. Outside the window, the rain began to ease even more, transitioning from a steady drizzle to a faint, intermittent patter. The water already on the ground continued its slow movement toward drains and soil, still glistening under the streetlights. The sound of the rain grew quieter, but it did not disappear. It simply moved further into the background, becoming a soft part of the world rather than the center of it. Their breathing matched this change without conscious intention. It too became softer, quieter, more spacious. The night reached a deeper level of stillness, and they went with it. In the chair, in the warm room, in the small house on Willow Street, they drifted further from waking and closer to sleep, and the world, in all its gentle, rainy calmness, held them. The night deepened outside the small house on Willow Street, growing softer rather than darker. The rain had slowed to a fine mist, falling so lightly that it seemed almost suspended in the air. It gave the town a dreamlike sheen, as though the world were wrapped in a thin veil, blurring the edges of everything in the gentlest way. Inside the warm living room, the person at the center of our quiet story remained in the armchair, wrapped in the wool blanket, surrounded by the soft glow of the lamp and the lingering warmth of chamomile tea. Their eyes were closed now, not tightly, just softly, the lids resting with the same gentle weight as the blanket across their legs. Their breathing was slow, steady, and deep, each inhale filling their chest with a quiet warmth, and each exhale easing them further into rest. For several long moments, they simply stayed like this, breathing, listening, drifting. Time lost its shape. The boundary between minutes and hours softened, becoming fluid, unimportant, almost unnoticeable. A faint breeze slipped through the small gap in the window frame, carrying with it the cool scent of rain-soaked trees. The breeze brushed lightly against their skin, merging with the warmth of the room in a soothing balance. Somewhere deeper in the house, a floorboard settled with a slow, familiar creak. A soft sound, a comfort rather than a disturbance. This house had always made small noises as it rested, as though the walls and beams were exhaling after a long day. They were not startled by the sound. It rolled through the quiet space like a slow wave, and then faded, leaving behind the steady hush of the rain and the gentle rhythm of their breathing. When they opened their eyes halfway, the room appeared softer, as though they were looking at it through the blur of a warm memory. The lamp's glow seemed warmer, rounder. Shadows drifted lazily along the floor. The surface of the table reflected a faint shimmer from the remaining tea. They let their eyes close again, not because they were forcing themselves to sleep, but because the body had decided it was ready. The muscles in their face loosened. Their shoulders sank deeper into the cushion. Their fingers relaxed, the last bits of tension slipping away like exhaled air. The world began to blur in the pleasant, drowsy way that signals the approach of sleep. Thoughts slowed until they felt like soft clouds drifting across a quiet sky. Images faded in and out, a candle flame, a raindrop sliding down glass, the curve of the park's path, the softness of the bookstore's windows. Each image drifted past without asking for attention. None stayed long enough to form a story. They were simply sensations drifting through the corners of the mind. You are safe. You are held. Everything is gentle now. Another soft breeze moved through the room, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and quiet night. They breathed it in without thinking. Their chest rose slowly. Their breath slipped out softly. The blanket warmed their legs. The chair supported their weight. The world around them held steady and calm. As their mind drifted, they imagined themselves walking once more through the quiet streets outside. The rain had become a thin mist, barely touching their skin. The shop windows glowed in soft halos. The puddles reflected blurred lights. The air tasted cool and clean. They imagined standing beneath the trees in the park, the branches arching overhead like a gentle shelter. Tiny droplets fell from the leaves in slow, irregular patterns. Some landed on the ground with almost no sound at all. Others drifted onto their coat, onto their hands, onto their hair. In this quiet visualization, they walked slowly along the curving path, feeling the earth stable and soft beneath their feet. The world around them glowed faintly, as though illuminated not by lamps alone, but by a deep sense of calm. They imagined passing the candle shop again, the warm amber light behind its windows, the small bell chiming as the door opened, the sense of honey, wax, vanilla, cedar, lavender, each one a soft whisper, offering comfort. In their mind, they lifted one candle gently, feeling its weight, opening the lid, breathing in a scent that blended rain with warmth. The memory of it lingered, long after the imagined scene faded. You can let your thoughts soften. You can let your mind drift. There is nothing you need to hold right now. Back in the living room, the tea on the table had cooled, but its warmth lingered in their body. They didn't need another sip. The comfort of it was still inside them. They shifted slightly in the chair, finding an even more comfortable position. The blanket moved with them, settling around their body like a cocoon of softness. Their head rested against the back of the chair, tilted gently to one side, Their breathing deepened again, slow, steady, the kind of breathing the body does when it feels safe. Outside, the rain continued in its soft, dreamy rhythm, sometimes light, sometimes nearly silent, like the sky was breathing along with them. Inside, the lamp flickered faintly. The air felt warm and thick with calm. Their awareness drifted again, this time deeper. They imagined sitting on the porch of their house, looking out at the rainy street. The porch light cast a small pool of radiance around their feet. The rain fell softly beyond the edge of the roof, forming a curtain of shimmering droplets. The world looked peaceful from there, the street empty, the houses quiet, the trees swaying gently. They could imagine listening to the rain for hours. No need to move, no need to speak, just being there, breathing in the night air, watching the delicate dance of water and light. This thought drifted away too, replacing itself with something even softer. The memory of the warm kitchen, the simmering kettle, the soft glow of the stove light. They imagined preparing another cup of tea, even though they didn't truly need one. Filling the kettle, lighting the flame, watching the water warm, hearing the faint bubbling, breathing in the steam. The sequence played out slowly, like watching someone else perform it from a distance. The details were dreamy, softened by the edges of sleep. None of it demanded clarity. None of it required decision. It was simply a soft reel of familiar motions. They drifted again. Now they were back in the candle shop, this time seeing it even softer, as if through a haze. The lights glowed amber. The labels blurred into gentle shapes. The scents became warm impressions rather than distinct notes. They touched the safe and sound candle again in their mind, and the warmth of that scent filled their chest even here, in the borderland between waking and sleep. Slowly, gently, the shop dissolved. It turned into the soft glow of the lamp by the armchair. The lamp turned into a blurry warmth behind their eyelids. The warmth turned into the steady hum of their own breath. Breath in, breath out. Slower now, deeper now. The boundary between imagination and the physical room blurred. Everything softened. The rain outside became a lullaby drifting in from a distance. The house felt like a protective shell. The blanket became a gentle weight grounding them. The chair held them with steady, patient support. Their awareness floated loosely, like a small boat drifting on calm waters. Thoughts came now as shapes, not words, colors, not sentences, soft pulses of sensation rather than ideas. This is the safest moment. This is the softest part of the night. This is where you can rest fully. Their breath fell into an almost imperceptibly slow rhythm, the chest rising a little, falling a little, holding at the edges, flowing again. Every muscle in their body loosened, even those usually hidden beneath the surface. The small muscles along the spine, the ones in the jaw, the ones in the hands and feet. They all softened, melting into the warmth of the blanket and the cushion. The lamp's glow dimmed slightly as the bulb warmed, or perhaps that was only how their drifting mind perceived it. Light and shadow mingled softly, creating shapes that moved gently along the walls. The room became a cocoon of warmth, a place outside of time, a home folded into sleep. Outside, the rain slowed to a near silent whisper. The clouds shifted, the breeze softened, the town rested more deeply. Inside, their breaths barely disturbed the stillness. Each inhale was like dipping into warm water, each exhale like sinking into soft earth. The world narrowed to warmth and darkness and the rhythm of breath. You are safe. Nothing can disturb this calm. You are held. The night is watching over you. Their thoughts no longer drifted in images. They drifted in sensations: warmth, heaviness, softness, emptiness, peace. The edges of the room dissolved. The sound of rain dissolved. Even the faint hum of the house dissolved. Everything became sleep. Not a sudden plunge into dreams, but a slow, gentle drifting, a calm descent into deeper and deeper rest. Their breathing softened into its quietest rhythm yet. Their body grew heavier. Their mind grew lighter. Warmth wrapped around them. The night cradled them. The world grew distant. And then, slowly, tenderly, completely, they fell asleep. The house stayed quiet. The rain whispered softly on. The small town rested under its soft, misty sky. And in the cozy armchair by the warm lamp, wrapped in a gentle blanket, held by the quiet night, they slept deeply, peacefully, fully. The night kept watch. The rain kept singing, and everything remained soft, safe, and calm.